Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome a newish friend into the fold here. Lynz Sickler is a 45-year-old trans non-binary femme, trans and queer youth advocate for over 20 years. They're the co-founder of TransPride Pittsburgh, and hence the relationship that we're in now, and executive director of Proud Haven. Everybody, welcome to the show, Lynz. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hello and welcome in. It's so great to finally have you on. We've had several
Yeah,
conversations about TransPride Pittsburgh and the work that we're doing together for
yeah,
that, and it's great to be able to share some of that tonight. But I love these where I get to dive more into your story and get to know more about the people I'm working with.
sure.
So the question I usually like to start with, Lynz, is how did you choose your name? And I know yours is very similar to your given
Mhm.
name at birth, right? So
Yeah,
what is the significance of it to you and kind of keeping as close to that as possible?
sure. Well, my name has always been really important to me, and I'm pretty sure that when my mom named me, she didn't realize how gender fluid it was. And so, growing up, I met several Lindsays that were boys, which was confusing to me as a little kid, but I also kind of liked it because you know, uh, I didn't have to be any way at all. I just, I was like, oh, cool, I can be anything. But Lynn's is just, it feels less aggressive. And one of the things I've been told, because I am so involved in so much and have been for many years, that sometimes people can find that to be a little intimidating. So I was hoping with a little bit of a softer name, it would be a little easier to approach me because that is really important to me in my work, and the stuff that I do with the community, both adults and youth.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, there is so much that you learn when you get into, kind of a public sphere, either presenting stuff to the public or interacting directly, the different the different things you need to be aware of and the different sensitivities you need to have to people. And it's interesting that the way your name is perceived is something that has come across you as something that's important to make sure to be mindful of. I love that note. So, as someone who we were talking before the show is fairly outwardly femme presenting, but identifies as non binary, what is your relationship to the transgender identity? Like, kind of, what does it mean for you?
From me, I mean, the relationship is community. I have always had issues figuring out where I fit. And for a very long time, because of how I was socialized growing up, the people that were around me, femme identity was kind of poisoned. And so when I initially tried to come out as non-binary, um, I was around a bunch of friends, most of whom happened to be transmasculine, and they literally laughed at me, and made gestures about my goddess of Willendorf shaped body and told me that I would never be seen as non binary. And that shoved me back in a closet
Hmm.
for a couple of years. Uh, but it was a friend of mine, Coley, who also is a non-binary femme. And we ended up having a lot of really deep discussions about that identity and why it's an important part of the spectrum of transness, and how we are just as valid even though we're not androgynous and we're not masculine leaning.
Mm.
um, and it really helped me connect to myself in ways I hadn't been able to before. I can't help that and I use this in an affirming way. I just want to give a content warning. But I can't help that I'm fat. I can't help how curvy I am. I have been this way my entire life. There is no way on God's green earth I would never be able to present in a permanently more masculine way. It was something that I considered for a minute or two, but that doesn't make me any less trans.
Mm.
Uh, so for me, it really was about connecting to my true self, who I really am, and not what people perceive me to be.
Mm.
Uh, I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Now, what sort of peace, you had that conversation with Coley, and you found that kind of inner peace with the non-binary identity, and you worked out that yes, this is a valid thing for me, and here I am. What peace have you been able to find with the non-binary shape? That's always something that kind of comes up of like, well, you don't look non-binary, or people
Right.
feel like they don't look like non-binary. First off, what does that even mean? But
Well,
but how do you get
it's
to a place where you found peace with that?
really, it was because of that really negative interaction with those people that were my friends for a really long time, and after that large amount of negativity, are not anymore. It made me really think about what people were saying and thinking in their brains when they said non-binary. What they were actually thinking, for the most part, is male and masculine. And while there's nothing wrong with that, because yes, non-binary people can be masculine leaning as well, it's just another way that people were invalidating the femme form and the femme expression.
Hmm.
So for me, it was that catalyst of being pushed back into the closet and really having to give myself another assessment. And did I want to have to? I cannot remember who said it, but there was somebody in the community several years back said, when you come out as trans, one of the things you have to understand is that you will be constantly educating others.
Hmm.
And for me, being able to accept my size and shape has had a lot to do with the new friendships that I have formed, the strength of the bonds of the people in my community, and my kids. My kids that I work with in the drop-in are wonderful human beings. They are very loving. They are very open-minded. They will be the first to tell me if my shitty committee is speaking too loud. Um, so like it really has been the people that I've been able to surround myself with across the spectrum that have helped me come to terms and feel good in my own skin.
Isn't that sort of the sad reality of self-acceptance, is how much of it is still ingrained
Yeah,
in the acceptance of others, and being able to find love from other people and acceptance?
yeah, yeah, truly is.
So when did you come to the point in your life where you knew that the non-binary identity was what fit you? When did you realize that?
So I was probably in my early, I was probably in my early 20s.
Mm.
I would say earlier than that, but I didn't have the language for it. And I was very much trying to epitomize what a dyke looked like.
Okay.
Uh, and then I wasn't dyke enough because I used to have really long hair. I was legitimately told that by a bunch of lesbians. And like I couldn't possibly be, like you can't possibly be a lesbian because and then as I got away from home and being controlled in what I wore and where I went, like I began to find my own fashion sense, which really right now is just splatters of color everywhere. I just don't care anymore. But previously, it was very masculine, very toned down, very layered because I didn't want my chest to be seen,
Hmm.
which is a task. And and I really had to sit and think about, why I was having those feelings about having to hide myself and where was this negativity coming about my female form.
Hmm.
And so I would definitely say it was early 20s. And then again, when I didn't actually, even though I had those thoughts, I didn't have the language. And when I finally had the language, and I came out the first time, I was in my early 30s. So like, and then I got shoved right back in the closet.
Hmm.
But it's been a bit of a journey. And it is for everybody, but like this is, we all have issues and problems, but this is the best I've felt in my skin, knowing myself and supported in my entire life. I know that I am completely surrounded, and I work with both professionally and in the community with folks that see me for who I am, and and God forbid you don't, because the people around me will correct you quickly.
That's the biggest testament, right? When they'll
Yeah,
go to bat for you, even in those instances where you don't feel like correcting an incorrect
yeah,
pronoun or whatever. You're just like,
yeah,
oh, you're going to stand up for me for that. Oh, well,
yeah,
that makes me
yeah,
feel good. You care.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting, you know, you going back a little bit to what we were talking about that, you know, non-binary identity. I think what a lot of people will picture is that androgynous look, right? That sort of rail thin,
Yeah,
no facial hair, kind of can't
white.
tell which it is.
Yes,
And I think that's a big piece of education we got to do. Non-binary does not mean androgynous.
correct. Correct. Non-binary people do not owe you androgyny, but that doesn't invalidate androgynous non-binary people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for some folks, it is very much a middle ground. For some folks, it's a beyond. Like you have to be able to look and see a person and not your perceptions of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling you before we started, like when I was beginning this journey publicly, and had decided to ask, to start asking people to use she or they. Literally nobody but my one friend ever used they. And I realized that I had asked people, I had included she to make other people comfortable. And why do I have to do that? Outside of my kids and my job,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do that. And so I stopped doing that. And yes, it does mean that I have to oftentimes spend a little bit of extra emotional energy on educating people that don't know. But it's worth it to me because that means that my 15-year-old and my 20-year-olds and my 22-year-olds maybe have to do it just a little bit less in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Violet brings up in the chat, and I feel like it's really important to interject this now. I feel
Sure.
that I feel the not trans enough so much for me. It's mostly an internalized thing, and that's why I haven't completely come out yet. And I
Yeah,
feel like from your personal experience that it's the opposite. There is a lot of gatekeeping, even within the LGBT, even within the
absolutely.
trans community, of what is
Yeah,
trans enough, what is non-binary enough. You know, these things.
right.
It's absurd to hear about, but it does happen. And to kind of contradict myself and go against what I'm just saying, I think it's sort of our collective internalized transphobias and
Absolutely.
phobias and things like
It's
that.
it's fear of being ostracized.
Hmm.
It's fear of being pushed out. It's fear of not being able to connect. And the thing is like, what's crazy about all of this is that we determine what femininity is. And we determine what masculinity is. And we determine what worthy is. At the end of the day, I remember when I was younger, my mom said, "Oh, when you hit your 40s, it's going to be completely different." And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I hit 45 and I really, my how I think about things is so different. Because I don't have all the answers, nowhere near. But I've begun to prioritize my comfort and my well-being in connection with everybody that is in my circles, and feel more comfortable standing up for folks. And I mean that in whether they have been he for 20 years or they changed how they identify yesterday. Tooth and nail, I will stand up, and I don't feel shy about it anymore. Whereas before, I was so worried about um, being kicked out of the club, whatever club that is,
Uh,
that I am my own club. My kids are part of my club. My community is part of my club, and we all take care of one another.
Yeah, but going back to it, to find that validation in yourself, especially early on, when you're trying to find that, when you're trying to establish yourself and get your legs underneath you, as far as like, what is my identity, and you are asking yourself, like, what of it is valid, what's invalid, it's so much of it comes from the external, and
Yeah,
you know that makes
absolutely.
perfect sense that it would matter so much,
Yeah, it
and
absolutely
you
does.
being accepted in the club that you identify with, you feel like you
Right.
belong in, if they start telling you no, then I mean you're instantly like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
not this, what am I doing wrong? And
Yeah.
it just takes that it might take hitting 40 for you to realize that no, the people around me that do support me and do love me are the ones that matter. It's not
Yeah.
that group that I thought was like me that I need to get the approval of.
Right. And, for me, like, I was sad for so long because, like, I have good people. I've had good people in my life. We got different rails of thought, but, like, but my girlfriends, I wasn't necessarily like, they would invite me to things that I was totally not into, because boobs. And like, and
Because
I'm just like,
boobs. Quote of the night. I love it.
why
Let's
do you
go.
think I want to do that? And then, but then, like, my guy friends, same thing. They're like, oh, well, you can't come, you're a girl. Like, and I was just like, I like literally people just, because I was like, I would have these conversations with them. I would love to hang out with you. Can we not do that? There's nothing wrong with getting your nails done. Sometimes it's fun, but I wasn't in the mood. And you think that, that's the only girl time folks can have. Can we do other activities together? And like, I don't care that you're talking about hooking up with people. Like, I'm chill with all kind of conversations. um, until I really started to get with it with myself, and started to surround myself with people that understood. It just was really hard to navigate
Mm,
because so many people, they're so worried about being different, and they're so worried, and it's reasonable. The world is crazy, but they're so worried about being different and being oh no, you're weird, like that. They're not actually themselves.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, for many years I was pretty lonely, to be honest with you, which is funny because the people that know me will be like, oh, well, you're outgoing and you do this stuff all the time. And yes, it was work, and that's how I communicated with people. So, yeah.
Well, and throughout your life, and now, I think I have a suspicion, but did you gravitate towards one gender over another as far as friends who you seem to identify with, or have you just sort of found that since you found non-binary and queer folks?
It was really confusing growing up, because again, like, I would gravitate toward the guys. And when I was in high school, there was a group of guys that I hung out with all the time until they remembered that I was a girl. And it was legitimately one day we were hanging. I remember this clear as day, and I was probably 15. Like, we were outside hanging on the swing set. The boys were talking the boy talk, about this girl and that girl and the other thing, whatever. And I'm just listening. I didn't say nothing. I was just enjoying the camaraderie and being around my buds. And, literally one of them looked up and said, oh my God, we can't talk about this stuff in front of you. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, and so for a while it was guys, and then I tried, to be more friendly with femme folks, and failed there too. And so really, and it's not a dislike. It just, like, it don't fit.
Yeah.
And so it really has been, because I love everybody, I do. But it really has been finding my own folks that I understand, like, being different,
Mhm.
and not prescribing to the binary of things all the time, 24/7.
So it sounds like kind of early on you had some coming out sort of moments, or like you had some identities that maybe didn't require coming out because it was just sort of obvious. uh
Yeah.
what was your experience there? Did you have like a particular coming out memory to any group?
Well, the coming out process has been long and windy. I came out as a lesbian, and my mother really thought that I had done it, to upset her. Legitimately said, "You're doing this because you're mad at me," and I was like, nope. Mm-mm. And then, trying to figure out, like, where I fit in on the lesbian spectrum. And it just, like I had long hair at the time, and full long hair, like not shaved sides or anything. And like, I was still friendly with guys. And so college time, you're supposed to hate people. And and it just, it was difficult. But outside of, when talking about my gender specifically, like the biggest catalyst for me to really dig deep was that incident with my friends at the time, and then literally going, oh, you could never be non-bi, look at you,
Yeah.
ha 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 ha, busting gut laughing, folded over, like. And I was just like, wow, you're my friends. Like, I think I need to think that through too. But then on the other side of that are people like Coley. People that when I shared that story with them, like, I remember very distinctly they got quiet, and then they're like, "That's crap."
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it was something to that effect, and it was just like it was the first time that I had said that story to somebody else that didn't shove it away and didn't, oh, you're overreacting, oh, it's not a big deal, oh, it's, they're like, they were there with me in the moment when I was telling the story, and I saw myself being seen,
Mhm.
and it was awesome. So I'm very grateful for them, and thankfully we're still friends because they're awesome.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. Did you have
Yeah.
anybody along that process that you came out to, or around that time, that supported you in a way that you weren't expecting?
um no, the support really came from my friends. I don't really have a relationship with what remains of my biological family, with the exception of my aunt and a couple of cousins, and they're chill. They're awesome folks. And but we don't talk about this kind of stuff really. Like, they accept me, they love me, and that's good. And we don't get into it too much. But the guy that was the last stepdad, like, he's not down
Mm.
with community stuff. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, much of my family has passed on. So it really has been my friends, and the people that I have found in community,
Hmm.
and through doing the work, to be honest with you, which was, if I'm being completely frank, the catalyst for me wanting to get involved in the first place. I am actually, as I said before, I don't like doing interviews and I don't like being in front of the camera. um, I'm actually horribly, horribly shy, and the only reason I have been able to be less shy is work and purpose. If I'm doing something for the kids, if I'm doing something for the community, it gives me a focus and takes me out of my shell a little bit. So it's really funny because when I tell people that I'm shy and they've met me out in the community, they're like, what? Like, no, you don't get it. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But yeah, no, I'm very shy.
Yeah, I need to look into that again. That was an idea that popped in my head, and I think I did just a 5-minute Google search. But like the trying to determine whether you're an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert, kind of a thing, right?
I think it depends on the day. I do, because it's one of those things, like, and I'm sure lots of people can relate. COVID and the pandemic has really switched up my brain chemistry a little bit. I used to go out all the time, but I was going out to friend shows. I was going to support them.
Hmm.
To me, in my brain, that was like, I am doing a thing for a purpose. Uh, I'm not
Again,
just, I'm
work.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and not an enjoyable work, lovely work. It's good stuff. But post, well, not exactly post, but post lockup. It's been a little harder for me to get out with people. I find my anxiety is really high. So, like, um, yeah, it's definitely hard to walk that line. Um, but the kids make it easy. I love them to death, and I do anything for them. And, like, and I know, and it's part of the reason why I'm so involved, because I know that if they need something, I can get it for them or get them to somebody that can get it for them. And that's what's really most important to me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I'm hoping we can get to that level too, but it's amazing that you've reached that with the resources that you have at your fingertips or the connections that you have.
Mm-hmm.
First I want to I love what you said in there, the last stepfather. That sounds like a somewhat touching 80s movie. Um,
Really
Violet
good.
Violet asks if you're comfortable diving a little bit deeper into this.
Sure.
Um, Wants to know a little bit more about what it was like coming out to family. You mentioned that you came out to your mom as lesbian, and
Mm-hmm.
she said you're doing this because you're mad at me.
Yeah.
Then you discover the non-binary identity, and you find that fits, and you've got to talk. What were those discussions like with your family?
Unfortunately, my mom had passed
Mm,
before I had come fully into that. I had that interaction I had with the friends that went so badly did happen before she passed, and then kicked me right back into the closet.
yeah.
Um, I had tried to broach the topic with her about gender nonconformity and what that meant, and androgyny, and this was probably 2 years before she passed. And she said, sometimes girls just like that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, well, this conversation isn't going any further. So, um, but like, and to be honest with you, it's never, because of because of the unfortunate dynamics of my immediate family. There hasn't been further conversation with like my stepdad. My brothers know. They're not necessarily, we don't have very much of a relationship, unfortunately.
Hmm.
My aunt knows. Sometimes she remembers, sometimes she doesn't. That's okay. Um, my cousins are chill. But it wasn't never a conversation that I think I directly had with them. They're just on my Facebook and just kind of see things. So like it was definitely a more kind of laid back approach to that. And occasionally like um I'll get questions, like random questions from distant cousins, like not first tier, about things, and I don't mind asking or answering. But it's more of a, I'm just curious, not I want to build a relationship with you
Hmm.
kind of thing. I can't stress enough the importance of having people around you that see you for who you are,
Hmm.
and how much more important that is than making sure your family is all on the same page. And I know there's a little bit of privilege to that, because in a way, me not having as many of my biological family still around does, oddly enough, gives me freedom that other people may not have. But also, again, I can't encourage any stronger, like making sure that you reach out to meet people that see you, and because it makes the non-acceptance from family members a little easier to handle.
I gotta apologize for something. I in setting up for the show tonight, I missed a very important detail, and just so you know, Lynz, I apologize. I had from a previous guest, I believe it was she her still up on the pronouns. I've fixed
Oh,
that, but
okay.
I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to throw that out there as an apology.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a slight
Thank you
oversight,
for
but
catching it.
yes, that my mods and my staff caught it, and thank you for that.
Cool.
I really appreciate the work that you do and for catching that. Uh, big moment of egg on my face, but I'm glad that you take it in good stride. Uh,
It's all about intent, right? Intent and impact. This wasn't something purposeful. And I
no.
know you see me.
um, that threw me off my track a little bit.
It's
So
okay.
the next thing that I wanted to talk about, what we generally talk about after we talk about coming out is the transition process. Because as I
Mhm.
mentioned before, a lot of my guests are on that, transitioning from one to the other. There's that whole roadmap and and
Right.
line that you go. We also talk about it in terms of a journey. What does your journey look like as a non-binary person? Is there something along that path that you've kind of had to do other than internal work to find your faith and comfortability in yourself?
Yeah. Well, like I had mentioned, there was a hot minute where I had thought about maybe taking tea. And I joked earlier, but it is true. I had cancer when I was 13, so my hormones are a little wacky.
Mm.
Anyway, and if I really wanted facial hair, I could have it. I just have to stop shaving because that's how my body hormones are. But I I decided, because of my health history and because I personally have to feel enough in my own skin. Another joke I make, which, because I've had surgeries, because, I had a thyroidectomy and I had ovarian cancer. It was a 10-pound tumor, blah, blah, blah. I joke about being a T-bone steak. Okay. And like, I don't want any more scars. I went through a period of time where I was pretty seriously depressed, content warning, and I very much did a lot of cutting on top of that. So I don't want to do that anymore. And the thought of potentially having any more scars actually is really triggering to me. Um, so it was really kind of all of those thoughts in what, like, am I enough? Is this right? If I'm shaped like this, can I actually be non-binary? Am I trans if I'm not taking hormones? Am I ever going to be trans enough if I don't do these particular benchmarks that so many other of our siblings do? And the truth is, yeah, yes, I am trans enough. I don't need to do those things. Um, that doesn't make me any less non-binary. It's not part of my path to have those surgeries. It's not part of my path to take those hormones. But I completely and totally 150,000% respect those non-binary siblings that do that. I have several that have had top surgery, that are taking hormones or not taking hormones, or they're taking a shot or using the gel or whatever it is. But it's not my path. And there's been a lot of discussion in the community about, you know, validation and not being a gatekeeper. One of the things I see working with mostly young trans youth is the type of impact that shame has on an individual person, on their physical self, on their mental self, on their spiritual self. And I know people who are older who are most definitely, here, beautiful, beautiful women. They cannot take hormones. They can't take hormones, and because of a something with their genetics. But that doesn't make them any less of a trans person, any less of a woman.
Hmm.
You know, same thing, other end of the spectrum. I know folks that would take tea, except that there's issues with their blood pressure, there was something else. um, doesn't make them any less of a man.
Hmm.
So knowing that, and knowing that I feel those that way about these folks that I know in my circles, i I just, again, it's not a complete thing. It's something I still have to work on every day. There was a moment 30 seconds ago where I was like, am I really talking about this right now? Yes, I am. But, like, because we all have imposter syndrome occasionally,
Hmm.
right? But for me, I this journey really has been about feeling good in my skin, knowing that I don't have to prescribe to some perceived thing about my body that is mine, and myself that I construct. And I no less trans than anybody else.
Hmm. Well, I'm sorry that you might have felt in the moment that you're talking like, am I really bringing this up? But
Yeah.
it's all incredibly inspiring to hear you talk about the things that you've gone through, and I'm so glad that we're able to share that with the community. So much of our experience comes down to, again, do I look feminine enough? Do I sound enough and look enough and act enough the way that I want to in order to be accepted in this specific community that I identify with and I look up to? And it's
Right.
just so beautiful to get to that place of finding that in yourself, the validation, the identity, the acceptance, all of that. And you know as hard as it might be to talk about some of these things, it's really important, and I really appreciate that you're
Yeah,
being
no
so open and
problem.
so raw about it.
Yeah.
I particularly love to talk about the harder subjects because these are the things that are the most important to talk about, because
Yeah,
it's about making sure that people understand that there are others going through the same thing.
absolutely. 110%. And I can verify that for going on 20 years. This struggle is eternal and so many people face it. And I think, because I feel the way I do about shame in regards to other people and how, we need to wash that away.
Mm-hmm.
That line of thinking for me, for others, is what helped me look in and start to unbind all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's an ongoing process. Uh,
Yeah.
so,
There's discussion going on in chat right now about, a fear of not being able to take hormones. I know there's a lot of fear out there of the hormones not doing enough. I constantly bump my head against that, of like, it's not working, it's not working.
right,
um and it's just something to really push back on. Someone mentioned the famous people that gatekeep against non-medical transitions, and that whole trans medicalist thing is a big thing. And there
it's
are
a big
people,
deal.
yeah, and there are
It's
people
a
within our
big deal.
community that believe that if you're not going through medical transition, you're not trans, you're not there yet.
Yeah,
And
I
it's not only is it bad gatekeeping, it's so bad because it counts out the people that can't, that need to and
right,
want to but can't because of their
right,
own physical things. It's not for lack of trying or want. They're not putting on a front or anything. It's not an affront to your identity. It's just they can't. And that's why the
right.
gatekeeping is so bad, because it's so short-sighted of what might be going on in a person's life.
Absolutely. And the thing is like it's nobody's business. At the end of the day, whether you can or cannot take hormones, it is nobody's business. It could just solidly just be your choice for your own personal reasons. It's nobody's business. And, I think it's great that these Hollywood types are transitioning and they're bringing popularity to the idea that we exist. But my friend Nancy, who unfortunately also passed away, I have a very vivid memory of her running from the back of the community center I was running at the time. And she was like, look at this. And she brought up the story about the Navy SEAL who transitioned. I cannot remember her name. I'm sorry.
Mm.
But it was a big deal. And it was when it happened. And, she was showing me transition pictures. And she's like, this is beautiful. I'm going to put this across social media. And it's fantastic. And I was like, do you really want to dangle that carrot? And I felt like I rained on her parade
Mm-hmm.
immediately, because yes, it's a very inspiring story, but it was an established human being who had money saved up, who was able to do all the things they wanted to do for their transition to make themselves feel good in their own bodies within a year. And when I brought that up to her, I said, how many people do you think that walk through this door would ever have the ability to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And she just got quiet for a minute. And she was like, oh. And I said, it's a wonderful, glorious thing. I think it deserves to be celebrated. It doesn't deserve to be the litmus for how anybody else should ever transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think maybe one of the important things is not to look at it in a vacuum,
Right.
because you're looking at the one story, and you're, holding up this one story, and it's like, well, there's problems in that, because you're
Yeah.
just talking about, okay, this is the right way to do it.
Right. There is no right way. That's the whole point. And if you're like if you general person out there are unhappy, it's important. I mean, what I do when I'm looking at that for myself is why am I unhappy? Am I unhappy because of something inside, something that, and where is that coming from? Is that my mom speaking from beyond the grave, and with all the ingrained things that she put in my head? Is it, I can give you an example. Very recently, I just recently started taking Zoloft derivative because I've been suffering with depression for years. My doctor's been trying to get me to take it, and my family was not down with it at all previously, which is why I never did. And I told my aunt, God love her, and I knew going in that she wasn't going to be okay with it, but I said it anyway. And at first she was cool, and then she said, "But you really need it." And I had literally spent 20 minutes telling her how much better I feel, how much more I get done, how much less weighted about all the stuff that was in my brain I feel, and that I still have my superpower, which is all of my emotive feelings, which is
Mm,
what I was worried about.
yeah.
And I got off the phone call and I was like, I have matured because she said the things that I knew she was going to say, and I didn't call the doctor and tell her to cancel the script. Like it really is about coming into your own and deciding that it is what you want, whether it's about transitioning or mental health care or whatever it is. Like, finding that support and knowing that you're doing the right thing for you.
If you still struggle with any kind of dysphoria or kind of down days on your identity, is there something, a particular ritual or a particular thing that you do to find validity in your identity and who you are?
So for me, um, I do occasionally have dysphoric days, and they're very confusing because I don't want the permanence of a top surgery, but occasionally, I actually just made a TikTok about this because I thought it was funny, because that's how I deal with everything. But not so much eat the teeth, but take them off and put them on a shelf, and then occasionally put them back on. Like if I could do that, that would be great. But being a fat person and like there isn't, and I have asthma. I quit smoking years ago, thankfully, but like I have asthma, I'm fat, and like I don't have the biggest bongas in the world, but they're fairly large for my size. And like, having any kind of restriction there, it's not going to work for me. And so when I have those days, I try to remind myself to be gentle. Um, or I'll say things to myself like, would you talk to a kid like that? No. Reminding myself that I need to treat myself with the kindness and compassion that I try to treat everybody with. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just have a miserable day.
Mhm.
But I do my best to ground myself. And like in the here and now. I do mindfulness exercises. What's a color, what's a smell, what's a, if it gets too much, to keep myself here and present, because sometimes that stuff can really spin you out, and it amplifies the am I enough conversation in your head, and it amplifies, you know maybe I'm just a big imposter, like this isn't for me, and da 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 da. And that's not real. That's all the doubt and everybody else speaking over me, and they don't get to have that. And it's just about reminding myself, on those days. And then when I still can't do it, I reach out to the people that I trust, because they know the kind of stuff that I go through.
I think that's really important to remember, to make sure you reach out. Make sure
Yeah.
you reach out to a friend and talk about it. It's important. It's valid feelings, and it's important to share that and get it off of your chest, and to be able to talk through that with somebody. I think far too often depression hits us, and one of the first things I find in depression is that we turn in on ourselves.
Yep.
Um, our our needs and our fears and the things we're going through aren't valid, aren't that big a deal. It shouldn't be affecting me like this, these sorts of things. So you feel it's
Mhm.
invalid to even present it to people and talk to them about it. And that just starts that nasty spiral that takes you to a really bad place. And so
Yeah.
it's important to remember to reach out and to talk to your friends at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty long list for you, but my next question is, do you have anything that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of, I usually say your transition, but because of your gender identity?
Um, yeah, I've gotten to be close to a lot of people that have changed my life in such positive ways. My involvement with the community, the trans community specifically, has been um, much deeper. I have been able to help facilitate needed discussions between, you know, parties that maybe haven't talked very well together before. Um, you know, because they know me from the community, and then like, oh, you're part of the trans community, oh, and oh, can I ask you about this thing, or oh, I have a cousin, or oh, my child, or oh, this, or oh, that. So yeah, I mean, it's helped me. I think it's helped me become more empathetic and sensitive to the needs of other trans and non-binary people, and those that are curious and exploring and trying to figure themselves out. And even those, you know, I have a couple folks in my circles who have detransitioned, and you know, they went through a very long time where they thought they were doing the right thing for themselves, and then they weren't. And what I've found really interesting is the couple folks that I do know, um, instead of becoming any kind of hater, they've become more compassionate. You know, they've become even bigger supporters of the trans community because there was a group of folks that allowed them to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, you know, the community involvement, helping to be part of TransPride Pittsburgh, which we started in 2010, um, getting involved with all kinds of different organizations, and helping folks get connected to the care that they need, that they request, um, has been big things for me. I hope I answered that correctly.
That's the good thing about the show. There isn't a correct, a right or
Oh,
wrong
good.
answer. So there you
Okay.
go. And hopefully this one doesn't then, based on what your previous answer was, kind of strike as too similar. But what is your favorite thing that you've learned across your journey, either about yourself or the world around you?
Oh, um, I think for like really the biggest lesson for me is that shame work is never done. Untying shame is never done. And it sneaks up on us in ways that we don't always think about. And it comes from directions from people that, you know, love us in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to protect us, will sometimes instill these ideas of shame in us, to try to protect us from the boogeyman, when really they become that boogeyman by not letting us be ourselves, by not seeing us as our true people, as the true people that we are. Um, I think too, and I said this before, the biggest thing for me personally, um, is being able to feel good in my own skin, being able to accept myself as I am, understanding that I don't have to, you know, I literally didn't wear a dress for 15 years because I didn't want people to look at me that way. You know, now that I'm more comfortable, I kind of wear dressy tops and bright colors all the time. And I found that happened with a lot of my other trans friends too. Like, you know, now that I don't feel like I have to prove something, now that I'm more comfortable in my skin, I do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice.
That's a beautiful space to get to. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And finally, What advice do you have to pass on to younger closeted trans folks out there?
I think the biggest thing is find your family, and friends and family as family. I use that all the time. Um, and that can be online because I know it is tough for some folks to get out and about. I know the fact that, like, we talked about it a lot, having the rainbow house on the door and stuff. Like, we're identified as a safe space, but also that's something that a non-supportive parent could cause them to not allow the child to come into the space. So, finding different ways to reach out, um, looking into uh, looking into local meetup groups, I think can be helpful, and also being very careful. I say all this like connect with people, connect with people, connect with people, but also please be very careful about how you connect, and be very what is the word I'm looking for? Mouth words. Um, conscientious of who you give your contact information to, not your chat handle, not your Instagram, but how people can actually physically reach you. You want to be careful with that information, but otherwise, like, really connections with others that can have some level of understanding of what you're going through is going to go miles.
Mhm. Well, that's why we've loved building a strong Discord community is, you still are predominantly looked at as a username. So there is still that sort of anonymity, but you're
Right.
in a curated community where it's a safe space. So you can stretch out a little bit and really bring some of that raw nature and talk about the things that are really affecting you openly.
Yeah.
And still, like I said, maintain a little bit of the anonymity. The mod team can get to that stuff and know who you are, but like for the most part, you're just another username out there, and so I feel like it's a nice layer of protection for folks.
Absolutely. 110%.
Nice plug there for uh, trans discord.gg/the transverse, or you can just go to our website, thetransverse.net/discord. Both will get you right there. Lynz Sickler, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure having you on tonight.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.